Okay, hey everyone, welcome back to Reprogrammed. Today I'm going to discuss one of the main pieces of equipment that you find in almost every universal type of gym, and that is a Smith machine. A Smith machine is very versatile. We can do a ton of different exercises on it. Today I'm going to focus on the squat setup. Now, I happen to be here in a just hotel gym in Miami. Again, found a Smith machine. Again, it doesn't matter how old, how new. Most Smith machines are going to be pretty universal, with the only two major variances are how much help the bar gets and therefore how heavy the starting point is. If the bar happens to feel heavier, we can always lighten up the weight. If the bar has a lot of help, like in its cable system, we can always add more weight. So don't worry so much about that. The key is that does it work smoothly? And the second point is it on a vertical track like this one here, or is it going to be on a 15-degree bend or incline? And that way, we have to consider a little bit more of that in our placement of whether it's our feet or our hands in the exercise that we're going to do. So I will talk about both. However, if you had a choice between a Smith machine on a vertical plane or on the angle, ideally we would choose the vertical plane. There's pros and cons to both, but the vertical has just better application over a broader band of exercises. All right, when we go to set up the Smith machine, the first thing we're going to do is look at the stoppers. Pretty much every Smith machine is going to have some type of stopper here that is really a safety mechanism. And so if I'm in here and I'm going to do my squats, let's say I'm coming down and I get stuck, guess what? This is free. And now I'm safe from doing this. So this acts like a personal spotter. When we do exercises, let's say like a skull crusher, which is one of my favorite tricep variations, we can also set the stopper not only so that we don't crush our head if the weight gets too heavy, but also we can do a concentric only type of squat. So if I wanted to do that, since I already have it down here, I can literally come in the bar, I can come underneath, I can go ahead, get my setup, and then I can just work on the concentric portion if that's what I want to do. All right, but the stoppers are here primarily for your safety, and they act as a personal spotter. Number two, all Smith machine setups have a rotating bar and some type of locked-in mechanism. So when you get in, like if it's a vertical, I can face in, I can face out, it really doesn't matter. Where it does matter is if I were to face in, now I have to pull the bar back to free it. If I'm facing out, now I have to bring the bar forward to unlock the mechanism. And why does that matter? Well, if I am now squatting, it's going to be natural for my hands to pull back and see how I just locked it back in. So in most scenarios, we're going to just think about the way that my hands naturally want to rotate in the movement, and that way I can position myself correctly. Again, for a squat, as I'm squatting down, since everything is pulling back in this direction, my hands are going to want to throttle back, so it would make more sense for me to come in this direction so that as I get my setup, I pull my hands back, I set my feet, and then as I squat, I'm not hitting like so. Whereas if I were doing an exercise, let's say like a skull crusher, if my hands are coming down towards my face, you can see they're going to want to roll back, which means, again, it's probably better for me to have a bench underneath so that my feet are in this way, my head's towards the back, and then as my hands are down, it keeps this from hitting. Now, one little hack. If you are in an exercise where your hands are constantly moving and it's going forward and back, and it's constantly trying to lock up on you, what you can do is you can take a simple band, and what I like to do is once I have this up, I'll take the band from here, I'll kind of wrap it around the back side, and that'll keep it disengaged. Now, you want to make sure that, of course, you can always get it back in. So that's where, again, having just good control, you don't want to have it such a heavy band that you can't actually get it back in. Or you can have your workout partner also help you rotate the bar. Other than that, that's pretty much the main considerations in terms of the setup of the Smith machine itself. Now the next thing is really just going to be the exercise. So for example, if I am doing my squats, First, I recommend, of course, going through my whole squat tutorial because the fundamentals of controlling your pelvis, your foot position, your hand position, your lat engagement, your ab engagement, your breathing, all of that stays the same no matter what. So the only thing that allows us to change on the Smith machine is my foot position. And this actually adds a benefit. There's a lot of people who will either be for or against a Smith machine, and they'll say, oh, well, the bar's not allowing you to move correctly, so it's where you set up, and that's going to change the biomechanical advantages, which again, done correctly, it can work towards your advantage or it can work towards your detriment if you don't know what you're doing. All right, if I want to come in here, first off, again, am I going to be more of a quad focused squat, which again, from the squat video, I'm either going to be narrow in my stance and therefore my knees are going to more forward, or I can be super wide, which is going to give me more of a glute dominant squat. And based on that is again going to change the bar position. So if I want to be in a more narrow stance, quad dominant, I'm going to have a more high bar squat. Again, if I'm wide stance, I'm going to have more of a low bar squat. But for this demonstration, I'm going to choose more of a quad variant. And that's because the Smith machine lends itself a little bit better for that application. The reason why I say that is that when I'm in a wide stance and I'm doing more of a hip hinge, you can see I'm going to have a little bit more translation here. Whereas if I'm in a narrow stance and I'm going to do a quad more dominant squat with the knees more forward, you can see I'm going to stay a little bit more vertical, and that works a little bit better on a system that keeps you in a straight line. Now, in the perfect world, the bar is always moving in a straight line, so that really shouldn't matter, wide stance or narrow stance. I'm just giving you tendencies. And I'll show you when I go to the wider stance some of those differences. However, when we are in a quad dominant, and we really want to focus on that, this is what really lends the Smith machine to be a great tool for this. Why is that? Because when I come in here and I pick up the bar, I can have my feet out in front and I can lean back, which I cannot do in a regular bar. If I had a regular bar, I'd be falling backwards right now. Conversely, I can also lean into it. And so why does that matter? Well, if I'm leaning into it, and notice I'm up on my heels right now, I can really load my quads. And you can see that right there. If I bring my feet forward, now I'm going to be sitting back, which again is going to load a little bit more of my glutes. So just from that fact alone, you can start to see what I'm going to play with. So if I want more of a glute, that means my feet are going to be more forward, and it's going to dictate a wider stance and a low bar squat. So let me demonstrate that. So if I come in here, again, I'm already getting my grip based on my lats and my shoulder flexibility. So I come underneath the bar. I'm going to choose my low bar squat. Remember, we always pick up the bar with my feet equal. I never want to see one of these bringing the bar up. So my feet are equal. I load my breath. After finding my pelvis position, I stand up and rock. Now I'm going to transition my feet. So I'm going to come forward and I'm going to step out. Now I've got my wide stance. So I'm going to hip hinge. Again, my butt's coming back, knees stay open, pulling down, and I'm sitting nice and low, driving my hips. You can see that hip extension. From this position, I sit, I've got a vertical shin, hip extension, and this is my wide stance, more glute focused squat. Now, if I want to go more towards my quad dominant squat, again, I'm going to have a narrower stance. I'm going to have the weight more forward. As I bring the weight more forward in front of me, again, I'm going to be more into my quads, whereas in the wide stance, I wanted the weight back, which is why I had my feet forward. So we're going to do the opposite. I get my same grip. I come underneath the bar. But again, now I'm going to go to my high bar squat position. Again, if you don't remember this, go back to my squat tutorial. I'm going to still pick up the bar in the same way. Load my lats, control my pelvis, load my breath, squeeze my butt, stand up, rock the bar forward. Now I move my feet. Now I'm going to move them back, keeping my narrow stance. And now we can choose, if I go so far back, you can see I got to be way up on my toes. So now I really engage my quads. Engage my calves because I'm up on my toes. The only way to change this is if I had my heel wedges so that my feet could be flat. My recommendation is only bring your feet back to the point that your heels can stay down. My heels can stay down, but this position is going to really drive my knees forward. So I might be limited by my ankle mobility. However, depending on the weight that you choose, I can come up on my toes if I don't have my heel wedges. My knees can come forward, but now I'm not limited by ankle mobility, but I'm limited by my calf strength. But I can come down into my quads and I can almost jump up with the weight. So as you can see, this is a very quad dominant squat position. Everything else remains exactly the same. This is what's cool about a Smith machine. By having a fixed bar, I can change the biomechanics and I can be safe at doing it without falling that I would have with a regular barbell squat. So again, I just showed you a wide stance glute dominant, a narrow stance quad dominant on the same machine. The only change if you had a 15-degree incline is if I'm already at this angle and I'm facing out, then that means the bar as it comes up is already behind me. So that is already going to dictate that it's going to be more of a glute dominant squat. So imagine if I'm standing, but that bar is coming down this direction towards me. I'm going to have my feet out in the same way, and it's already geared towards that glute squat. So if I wanted my quad squat, I would have to turn around with that same foot up position because that bar is going to come back. So it's going to sit me back this way, and I'm going forward in the bar. That's no different than if I'm back here behind the bar and pressing up this way. So that's really the only difference. You're going to keep your feet back in both positions on the 15-degree, and it might feel a little more awkward at first, but all you have to do is play with how far forward and back to make sure that when the bar comes down, your weight distribution is still over the foot. But again, what are the dictating forces? Wide stance versus narrow. If I'm sitting back in my glute dominant squat, then I want my feet out in front. If I'm in my quads, I want my feet behind. But if that has an angle, my feet still have to stay behind because the bar is coming back to the original position. So hope that makes sense. Go ahead and play around with that and understand the ability and the power of the Smith machine in your squats. Keep watching because we're going to go over several more exercises and applications of the Smith machine. That way you can get a great workout no matter what gym you're at as long as you have this one piece of equipment.